Welcome back to another Tierthat. So in the last video, we talked about the bell curve rule. It wasn't actually last video, but that's not important right now. I found this comment very insightful. It says, my greater point is if you're ranking something like a 10 out of 10 album songs, which, Breach is, for instance, more of them would be towards S tier because you're ranking them not across the album, but across music in general. So it'll be skewed towards A or S. James here is onto something. This something is something we at Tierthat call scope. Let's say you're tiering fruit, which we have a video we've done for that, so go check it out. But, you're like, oh, watermelon, that's pretty A tier. Grapes, those are S tier. Oranges, those are so much work, they're D tier. That's all fine and dandy because my scope here is fruit. This is how fruit fares against other fruit. But let's say we introduce one pesky little vegetable, suddenly everything by comparison is now S tier. So since we're always using Breach as our example, I'll now show you some examples of some scopes. This is Breach, tiered against Breach. You can see that this follows the bell curve rule because you're tiering Breach against itself, meaning that, 50% of it should be before the line, 50% after. We talked about this. But that's what Breach looks like against Breach. If you take a look at Breach against all the other 21 Pilots songs, you see it starts to get skewed more towards S, because Breach is their best album ever. Now lastly, if you look at Breach tiered against all the music I've ever heard, every single song is in the S tier, which is how I tiered the last two times I tiered it this way. Now the last thing I'd like to talk about here is global scope. Global scope is scary, but it's how most tier lists are done. Global scope is where everything that you've ever known in the entire world is being tiered. But you're just tiering one small part of that, which in this case is the Breach album. So you're tiering things, everything's going fine. You've got Downstairs in the S tier, you got Drum Show in the S tier, you got Robot Voices in the S tier. But then you start to remember other things in the world. You're reaching for Drag Path when you think, man, this is probably the greatest song 21 Pilots has ever released. But then you remember the actual greatest song 21 Pilots has ever released, Redecorate. And you think, well, gee, if that goes in the S tier, Drag Path must be A tier at best. You reach for Contract with the intention to put it in the A tier, no pun intended. But then you start to remember the concept of 21 Pilots as a whole, and you think, well, 21 Pilots, they're S tier. So the Contract must be B tier. Things are spiraling fast. You reach for Garbage to put it somewhere near the bottom, but then you remember something truly horrible, Cough Syrup. And if Cough Syrup's F tier, there's no way that Garbage is F tier. You put Garbage up in the B tier. You realize for an instant that you've put Garbage in the same tier as the Contract, and you question it for a second. But things are moving fast. You grab Tally, and you think, well, this is far better than Garbage. It must be A tier, until you remember the greatest show ever made, Avatar: The Last Airbender. And you think, never mind, Tally's Garbage. No pun intended. Until, of course, you remember the live-action Last Airbender, in which case Tally has to be C tier, because I've already forgotten about it while tiering it. It's time for Raw Fear to go to the A tier, but as you're taking it there, you suddenly remember last night you were watching a documentary about the moon landing, and they were so convincing. Was it real? Was it fake? You'll never know. So you stick it in the D tier, and then suddenly you realize it turns out you've been tiering Raw Fear all along. You reach for Days Lie Dormant, and suddenly you've got Colgate toothpaste, which you then place in the C tier where it belongs. In a moment of pure instinct, you sneak one way into the A tier where you're 80% sure that it belongs at this point, and then you grab Center Mass to join it. You reach for another one and suddenly you have, what's this? The 2020 election. Was it good? Was it bad? I don't know. Who did I even vote for? I was just trying to tier the Breach album. Suddenly, all that's left in your tier list is David Bowie's The Labyrinth, Zendaya's Zendaya album, and Alabama's mascot, Big Al, which you're not even sure you've thought of before this point in your life. You quickly tier these last few things where they, most certainly belong. This is what your viewers are actually seeing. Now you've lost all your subscribers, and people are calling for you to see a doctor. So yeah, tiering the global scope can be a little risky, and can ruin an entire life. But that's where we seem to like to tier things. So that's scope, and this is probably the worst tier list of the Breach album you'll ever see. So I recommend limiting scope, but global scope is just one of the easiest ones to do. It's very whimsical, really inconsistent, and yeah. So hope this was educational, and thanks for watching.